Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to this learning experience brought to you by Authentic ID. My name is Cody, and welcome back to Techstrong Learning, where we have an exciting program ahead. But before we get things kicked off, I do have just a couple of housekeeping notes I'd like to review with you. First of all, we are recording today's session. So if you have to step out, if you miss any of today's program, you want to rewatch, or of course, if you'd like to share with your team, you will be receiving the on-demand recording via email shortly after we conclude this live session. If you'd like to engage with us, there are a couple of options for you to do so. The first option is the chat tab, which you'll find on the right side of your screen. So if you see that chat tab, I'd like you to test it out by letting us know from where in the world you are joining us. Now, if you do have any specific questions, we do want you to send those into the Q&A tab. The Q&A tab can be found directly on the right side of the chat tab. And we do want you to reserve that for any questions you have for our hosts or our speakers. Sending in your questions to Q&A helps us keep track, and we want to include as many of your questions as we can. Now, we will have 2 polls that will be launching throughout today's program, so keep an eye out for whenever those pop up. And before we close out today, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around to see if you're one of our lucky winners. So our topic today is building trust and digital identity verifications, account enrollment, and beyond. And I'm joined today by Blair Cohen, President and Founder of Authentic ID, Will Charnley, Managing Director of Liminal, Stephanie Goldner, Senior Product Manager for Biometrics and Device-Based Authentication at Capital One. And leading our conversation is our very own Mitch Ashley, CTO of Techstrong Group and Principal at Techstrong Research. So I would like to thank Stephanie, Will, and Blair for joining us today, but the pleasure is handing it over to Mitch to hear what these experts have to say. So Mitch, you want to take it from here?
Fantastic. Thank you, Cody, and echo our thank you to our panel today. My name is Mitch Ashley. I'm happy to be with you. We're talking about building trust in digital identity verifications and account enrollment and beyond. It's interesting because I feel like I do this every day and it's changing as we're using the applications and systems and business relationships in our digital world. So, it's not only keeping it secure, but how do we deliver that experience? I think is a lot of what we're going to talk about that so that customers are successful. We build trust with them as we shift from in-person, in-branch to digital accounts and digital experiences, and how we combat some best practices around combating fraud and delivering more seamless customer experiences. So we're going to talk about a number of things, and I'm really pleased to be joined by our panel. So before we get into diving into the conversation, I wanted to give them an opportunity to let them know a little bit more about themselves, let you know about them. So Blair, would you kick things off? I'd love to hear a little bit more about you and Authentic ID.
Thanks, Mitch. Thanks for hosting us today. And yeah, I'd be happy to. So Blair Cohen, I'm the founder, president of Authentic ID. Authentic ID is a next generation identity company that services major enterprises across a bunch of different verticals, as well as government customers. So throughout the past couple of years, we've seen pretty much everybody in the U.S.'s identity. So it's been an interesting ride.
Fantastic. I think that's a good thing you've seen my identity. I hope it is. I'm sure it is. Will, would you introduce yourself? You're on mute, probably. We're not hearing you well.
Doesn't look like he's on mute.
No, doesn't show mute. Give him a chance to look at that. Not hearing you yet. Maybe Cody can help you in the background while we're working on this. Stephanie, would you jump in?
Yep, of course. And thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here and a part of the panel. My name is Stephanie Goldner. I'm a senior product manager at Capital One, focusing on innovation and around biometrics and device-based verification. In terms of my background, I spent a lot of time at startups helping to build and launch digital products and experiences both internationally and here in the United States, and more recently have been supporting large enterprises in doing the same. And most recently at Capital One, thinking through how to build out secure and low friction experiences for our customers.
You are living the dream. Exactly what we're talking about today, for sure. Will, how are you doing? How are your?
I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, you are.
Okay, perfect.
Fantastic.
Sorry about that. My team would be very happy. You know, they're always trying to get me to shut up. So it's good. So thanks for having me, Mitch, and excited to be on this panel. Will Charnley, Managing Director at Liminal. Liminal is a preeminent strategy, advisory, and research firm focused squarely in digital identity. So we work with investors, solution providers like Authentic ID, as well as solution seekers, in some cases like Capital One. So we sit kind of squarely in this market. We're a team of kind of trusted advisors there, and have deep kind of expertise in this space. So really good for today's conversation.
Very cool. Let's see. Do we have Blair back? I think he may have dropped and joining again. If so, not a problem. We will continue to bring him back into the conversation when he joins. Stephanie, would love to hear about what you're seeing as some of the fraud trends in the financial industry, and maybe what are the approaches that you're taking or you see companies taking to respond to that.
Yeah, of course, and happy to kick us off. So in the past couple of years, we've seen a shift in consumer behavior, and that's been true for the financial industry and across companies. The pandemic really drove consumer behavior online, and we've seen that shift has also been true from a fraud point of view. So as organizations build great customer experiences online, they're trying to strike that balance of seamless and easy customer experiences while preventing fraud and keeping that high bar for security in a digital landscape. Biometric technology in particular provides a really interesting way to approach that challenge. It's recommended by identity experts for higher levels of assurance, and research has shown that consumers are ready to adopt these experiences, whether it's thanks to iPhone, right, for unlocking with facial recognition, or various other examples of use cases. So we're really seeing the industry start to adopt biometric technology and explore biometric technology as a way to meet those customer demands online while keeping a high bar for security.
It is pretty phenomenal how users have accepted so much change in how we identify, manage all of the identity parts of our world. It used to be just your license, right? Or your government ID. Was there? Will, hey, were you back with us, Will? I'm sorry, Blair. I didn't mean Will. Blair, are you back with us?
Yeah, Blair, I'm back. I've got you audio-wise. Can you hear me okay?
That's the most important thing. We've got your audio. So welcome back.
I don't know. I've got a pretty face. I'm sorry that isn't being shown too. But
well, you got a nice photo. So that'll fill in for the video. So Stephanie was sharing some fraud trends, and I want to put up a poll in a moment. But I also want you to help us kick things off of kind of what have you seen in the evolution through the years of fraud in your industry experience. That's some context for us.
Oh my gosh, we should have booked 3 hours for this, Mitch. But it's been pretty unbelievable. So I've been in identity, if you will, directly in identity for about 13 years, but ancillary to identity in a previous company that I created, a company called Infomart that does background checks. So I've literally been in the identity space for about 30 years. And what I've seen change is almost everything. The tactics, the targets have changed pretty dramatically. The tactics they use have changed pretty dramatically. And now the technologies that they have available to them are really pretty incredible. So the targets 30 years ago used to be banks. We went where the money was. Sorry, Stephanie, but that's just where everybody attacks. It's where the money was. Today, that attack landscape has broadened dramatically. It's no longer just banks. It is some surprising places. So you think about buy now, pay later. You think about push payments. You think about social media. Whoever thought about social media? But this is a tremendous attack vector. And maybe the most alarming trend that I've seen lately, Mitch, is you have the ability to validate a social security number directly through the Social Security Administration. And last year, out of those submitted to the Social Security admin, 7.9% of people lied about their social. They were not who they said they were. And you think about stealing money, that's bad, right? But we can all overcome stealing money. But I'm pretty frightened by the thought of an insider and what they can do, an insider in your IT department, an insider in your accounting department. So the targets have really changed. The tactics that they use have really changed a lot. It used to be, all of us had poor passwords, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they were guessing passwords or able to go to your social media account and figure out what your password was. So it was pretty elementary, pretty rudimentary. Today, the tactics have to be far more sophisticated. The barriers that banks like Capital One put in place to stop this kind of fraud are pretty significant. I was recently talking to one of our telco customers, and they had a fraudster that was literally so talented that for one transaction, they were able to socially engineer 3 different people within the organization and retrieve those one-time passcodes from 3 different people. I mean, that takes a lot of sophistication, a lot of skill. But today, that skill with the technology is coming into play. You no longer have to be that skillful. Used to be, we all saw the Tom Cruise video where it was AI and it wasn't ever him. That was done years ago before these tools existed, and that took somebody that had a great deal of skill and a lot of time, effort, and energy. Today, if somebody were listening to this webinar, they would have enough snippets of our voices to be able to realistically synthesize and recreate our voice. That's pretty scary when the tools could be in the hands of a 10-year-old. So a lot has changed over the past 30 years. Targets, tactics, technologies, the 3 T's.
Well, let's on that note, because some of the things we have in our poll also kind of looks a little bit to the future. Why don't we bring up our poll here and everybody vote? We'll see. No, the other one, Cody. Sorry, the second one. If you bring this one down, we wanted the first one. There we go.
Forget you saw this one.
Reverse order. Why not? What fraud threats are you currently struggling with the most at your organization? Select all that apply, right? So if folks want to take a moment, just tick off what things stand out the most to you and jump right on it. We'll see. Well, as soon as we get enough votes in here, we'll start to show some of the data as people are voting. We'll kind of see it live voting as well. I was thinking about that first item, synthetic identities, right? We're now with AI and of course with ChatGPT and all the things we can do with LLMs and creating graphics. We're creating there are companies will create a synthetic you that you feed it text, and it will do an avatar of you speaking in your voice and in your image. So things are changing very fast. So interesting. Yeah, the synthetic ideas top of mind for many folks, along with AI bot attacks. We still have some votes coming in. We'll leave this open for a little while. Can you put that back up, Cody? Let's give our panel a chance to kind of soak that in and talk about it. Since Blair, you're talking about kind of the evolution, thinking about where we are looking forward, what's your reaction to this poll?
I think we've got some pretty smart people in the audience here. I would concur. Synthetics we're just seeing like crazy all over the place. I don't know if anybody, I don't want to give a plug for somebody else, but David Mayman is a professor at Georgia State University, and his team of students spend their whole day in the dark web. And the synthetic identity problem is pretty significant. I was looking at a post from him yesterday, and they had from just one marketplace about 80 different cards that have been pre-approved and were ready for sale. And some of those cards had an $18,000 limit on those. So that was clearly a pretty well baked and seasoned synthetic identity. But some of those, this is a tremendous problem. And I don't think that people are doing enough to detect the synthetic. So I would agree that that's the number one problem that we're seeing anyway. Stephanie, I'm curious about you though.
Yeah, I think, I definitely agree with you on all of the points that you brought up. And synthetic identity fraud and theft is definitely one of the greater trends that we're seeing in the industry. I think I'll go back to another point that you made about just how much easier it is for fraudsters to get information today. And to one of the points that I brought up, which is as consumers, go online, they have so much more data that they're sharing across all of the different platforms, which gives fraudsters more data to work with to build these identities more effectively. And so I think that in particular is what makes it so hard to tackle as a challenge.
Mitch, I think you're on mute. I'm going to weigh in actually just real quick. I think, we actually went and looked at this market specifically around kind of buyer sentiment, solution seekers, right? And what we saw specifically around synthetic identity. And I think what was in there is also the potential risk of something like generative AI when it comes to creating synthetic identities. 70% of buyers that was the number one concern that they had in the market in terms of their existing solutions and ability to handle the threat. So they have something, it's not capable of doing that, which I think really kind of underscores the need for solutions there. When you think about just overall trends in the market, right? You have things like passwordless authentication, which are closing down some threat vectors, right? Password 123, that's going to close that threat vector. Fraudsters aren't going to pick up their stuff and go home. That's not how that works. They just move to other areas, right? And, I think we're going to see account opening as being a really key use case and point of attack. And generative AI is like pouring fuel on that, right? It increases the volume, it increases the effectiveness of that. I think, that is a key area when we think about fraud that we have to really consider here.
Fantastic. Well, we've got you mentioned some statistics. I believe Liminal had some research showing the kind of upward trend of adoption in identity verification. Can you talk about that and maybe some of the main drivers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, when you think about kind of new digital account opening growth, right? There are a couple big drivers you have to consider. One is kind of internet access overall. This great S-curve. Internet access overall, right? If you even go back, less than 10 years ago, right? You're talking about, around 2/3 of folks globally had access to the internet in some form, right? So that is trending up. That's driving growth. You also have to think about when you look at industry by industry, kind of digital penetration overall, right? Capital One probably 20 years ago maybe wasn't onboarding a lot of folks through digital channels. I would imagine, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that probably the vast majority of folks coming on today are doing so digitally, right? So that trend is also increasing. And just the number of accounts people are actually opening also increasing, right? You think about even, in banking and other industries, right? You're not just creating one account, one-time use, you're switching accounts, you're opening new accounts, right? That's increasing that growth trend. What we saw really is kind of leading up to say like a pre-COVID time, right? Kind of growth right around probably, we had 9.5% kind of year over year there. COVID, obviously, 2020, 21, kind of hockey stick effect there. You had right around 18% growth overall. Last 18 months, some of the macro market conditions, I think, have constricted that account opening growth. But we're seeing a lot of, especially recently with the threat of fraud and, the kind of ongoing need to be compliant with regulations, which is another aspect, right? We are seeing this growth kind of re-accelerate, and we're seeing kind of a second phase here of kind of accelerated growth where we're expecting it to be, near 14-15% new user growth over the next few years here through 2028. So I think we're seeing a big need, especially for solutions that can solve fraud and also ensure, I'm sure Capital One, very important that you're compliant as well with regulations. So.
Absolutely. Very important. Compliance with regulations. I think at least it's easy for me to think about, identity verification, signing up for a service as an account at a bank or a financial institution. But it's a lot more, there are many more ways that customers interact with financial institutions. Stephanie, right? It isn't just I'm an account holder and I want to put some money in the bank or I want a credit card. There are such a wide range of services under different brands delivered across different technologies. I mean, it's the plethora of avenues where you need to do that identity verification is quite broad. Can you say some about that?
Yeah, yes, absolutely, and 100%. And I, while we're speaking about the financial industry here, I think that also applies broadly across large service organizations. Mm-hmm. I think one of the key points that I got from Gartner, actually, they talk about the convergence of fraud detection, identity proofing, and authentication to have a really comprehensive approach to securing digital channels. I think that is a critical aspect of building out strategies to get better at this and preventing fraud as we move forward, is because we have so many channels and so many services and so many opportunities. Are we thinking of those? Are we able and positioned to think of those holistically and in terms of our defense and compliance and customer experience and balancing all of that, not only in the single experiences, but across those various touch points. And I think to Will's point too, you can do really well at securing one of those points, and then the fraudster will skip the door and go through the window, right? So having that balance, I think, is really critical.
They only have to be right once, right, or successful once, correct? Yeah, that adage. Why don't we turn a little bit to another topic that we wanted to discuss, talking about, it's one thing to say we want to onboard customers. Great. Well, that could be a great experience. That could be, thank you, I don't want to do business with you based on that first experience. So you've got to balance, the security, fraud, and fraud prevention, the kind of information that you need, but also in the process that you go through that experience with the customers have. I think we've learned a lot about how to do that much more successfully. And I'm really curious your thoughts on some of the best practices on that, Stephanie.
Yes, absolutely. And so, we mentioned a couple different things, right? But there's fraud prevention, there's compliance at any large organization, and then there's customer experience. And I think finding that balance is something that all organizations are continuously working on. But generally, large institutions like ours have processes or checks and balances, so to speak, in place that ensure that balance is maintained. So whenever we're launching a new product or service or making changes to an existing product or service, typically that's something done as a collective. Various stakeholders come to the table to represent those different perspectives. So we'll have, somebody from fraud at the table, somebody from cyber at the table, somebody, our business stakeholders, our sales, marketing, et cetera, to represent that broad set of perspectives. And it's really in that broad representation that we come to a consensus where we find what we think is the best balance across all of those tiers, the compliance, customer experience, and fraud. And then obviously there's a key point about you may come to a point where you think this is balanced, but then you put that change in the market. And do you have the right information to be able to continuously monitor and ensure that you are maintaining that balance, especially in an environment where things are shifting so rapidly?
Interesting. Any thoughts, comments, Will or Blair?
Yeah, I think Stephanie really hit on it, right? I mean, there's a lot of folks involved in this decision because, it is the main way a lot of people are interacting with enterprises like Capital One, right? It's digital channels, right? It's, maybe I'm wrong, but, less walking through the physical door, right? This is the digital door. And so, a lot of folks have a say in that. And I think really what we're seeing and what we found is, partly solution providers, it's really about having a solution that can kind of speak to the benefits for each person, right? The person, in marketing and customer experience, they want traffic in, right? The person in fraud wants fraud out. The person in compliance wants regulators happy, right? You got to do all those things. And so, kind of having a complete comprehensive solution, allows each stakeholder, because it's not just one stakeholder, to have their kind of needs met. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of value from, really kind of more complete solutions versus, sometimes you might have, singular kind of endpoint solutions that solve one business need, but kind of ignore the rest. And that's really where we're kind of seeing a lot of the drive for kind of these, more robust platforms coming in.
Excellent. The one little aspect, I think we may have covered this pretty well. One of our audience members was asking about this implementing identity verification process in a frictionless manner. That's a term that we, use much more frequently, meaning it's not, you aren't running into barriers or things that are, dragging down the user experience. Is there any learnings that we've had about things that help make it a frictionless experience?
Gosh, I'll chime in a little bit. I mean, it's all about customer experience. I mean, you've got to progressively allow them to put in as little data as possible to get the process started. So asking for a government issued ID as being the first step probably isn't the right way to go. It's a pretty important step because it can extract data from a document and pre-fill forms without a user having to type those. But is it the right first step? Probably not. Maybe an email address. So progressively move them into this onboarding process instead of giving them one form to fill out all of this stuff. They just become overwhelmed and abandoned. So that's one tip.
Mm-hmm. Everybody wanted to talk, so jump in, Stephanie, on this one.
Well, I 100% agree with Blair, and I think there is also a push to think through how do we do backgrounded identity verification, right? Like with not creating friction in a way that impedes part of the consumer's regular process. But the other thing that or twist sort of that I'll throw in here is that we've also found through industry research that customers are not as opposed to overt, to present in your face friction as one would think in the right experiences. And so I think that's just something to note. There are scenarios where customers expect friction and that actually drives the feeling of security. Mm-hmm. And so while we don't want to make that something that we present in every experience, it's not necessarily a bad thing always.
Yeah, Stephanie, that was a great point. You took the point I was going to make. I think, frictionless is kind of like people say real time. Nothing is actually, you know, real time, right? It's near real time. You know, I do think you have to balance that with security, because if I'm opening a bank account and, you know, all I have to do is, you know, give the first letter of my name, I'm going to say, wait a minute, that was way too easy. And now I feel really nervous about opening this account and putting my money in there. So the friction has to meet kind of the use case, right? You know, different if you're opening a bank account than if you're opening, you know, an e-commerce account, maybe, right? It has to match the use case. And in some that, you know, there's the additional security you get is actually, it is a better UX than having less quote unquote friction, for sure.
Yeah, that's too easy.
I appreciate it.
Too easy. I know something's wrong.
Yeah.
Say, Blair, take us in this direction, if you would. Give us a little bit of a behind the scenes look at how IDV technology is used in the detection of fraud and how we verify IDs during this kind of account enrollment process.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. What slide is up right now? Can you tell me?
I have some. Let me bring some up. We have some. I think they said you'd like to reference. Okay, we have slide 3. Sorry, my bad. I jumped here. Slide 3.
What is the title?
I'm sorry. It's the identity proofing steps from onboarding to reauthentication. So
perfect.
I love it.
Okay.
I love this visual. Okay.
Yeah, the visual is pretty good, but this visual is probably something that most of you have gone through before. And have seen before. 10 years ago when we started this company, this was a brand new concept. So the concept in the past was to prove identity, as Will was talking about. Let's ask the make and model of his first car, his cat's name, his mortgage payment last month. And if Will can answer those, it must really be Will. What we found is that data is super vulnerable and it's been breached, and all of our data is in the hands of a lot of different people. So it's no longer safe and no longer the best practice for onboarding a new customer, particularly in a high risk or a regulated industry. So to raise the bar a little bit, the first step, the gold standard for proving identity across the globe in an account opening scenario is to present your government issued ID. But if you think about the absurdity of that, we support over 12,000 different identity documents around the globe. Maybe my Wells Fargo branch associate could get pretty good at recognizing the Georgia driver's license, but to understand 12,000 different documents is pretty tough. So what we do is raise the bar significantly, Mitch. We just ask the user to present their government issued ID. They're able to do this remotely. They don't have to go into a branch or a store to do this. They simply take a picture of the front and the back of their ID. We make that very easy for the user by putting it in the camera in video mode. So they just have to point it in the direction of a document. We'll sense that a document is there, start analyzing every frame that phone will produce. And as soon as we sense optimal conditions, which could be very, very quickly, we're going to snap the perfect picture for that consumer that has good lighting, great focus, all 4 corners of the document in view. We're going to submit that document for authentication. And when we talk about document authentication, people always kind of scratch their head. What really happens under the covers here? We do have another slide that I'm going to go into more detail, but it is not us pinging the DMV, I just referenced the state of Georgia. It's not going to the state of Georgia and saying, does all this information on this document match what you have on file? We have done that for other large banks. And what we've found is that validating, because all you have the ability to do when you validate directly with the issuer of a document is to validate the biographic elements, attributes on that document. So in running for one of the top banks in the country for a couple of years, we would do the document authentication, tell the bank whether the document was real or not.
And then they would take the data that we scraped from the document and run it up against the issuer. What we found was that about 85–90% of the time that we said a document was fake, we know that it's a fake document. The data that was on that document would actually match what was on file with the issuer. So I'm getting a little bit digressed here from what this flow is. But anyway, the process is super fast, completely automated. Take a quick picture of the front of your document, take a quick picture of the front of your face. What happens in a fully automated way in about 6 seconds time is we run 2,000 or so. It depends on the identity document. Every identity document has a different number of security features, patterns, data that we can run our algorithms on. But in general, roughly 2,000 different tests on an ID to see if it's real, if it's been digitally manipulated or not, or if it's a flat out counterfeit. We match the person at the end of the transaction, again in real time, to the headshot that's on that ID. We make sure that that headshot on the ID hasn't been manipulated using some sort of generative AI or generative face creator. Then for a lot of our customers take advantage of the next step or the next phase in the process, and that's called Fraud Shield. So every time that we take a picture of an ID, we're scraping all the data from that document, we're scraping the face, the biometrics from that document. And a lot of our customers have a set of banned people that they never want to do business with again. For whatever reason. Our customers have the ability to put those banned people into our Fraud Shield repository, and we take the biographic data from the document, the biometric data from the document, run it through Fraud Shield to see if we've ever seen that person before. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've seen the same face on more than 100 different identity documents, all containing different PII. Mm-hmm. So I've already talked about the fact that this is a fully automated process. All 5 of those steps that you see on the left side happen in about 6 seconds time. So the user doesn't even really know what's going on. It just happens before they have a clue. Whereas other people that do this end up having to send these images to, because they don't have the right kind of technology, send it to people, which really delays the process, doesn't add efficacy to the process. I'm an expert at this, and I guarantee I'd miss at least half of the counterfeits that came across my desk. But lastly, it adds a lot of time. So the fact that we're able to do this very, very quickly without humans, also the other benefit that you reap is there's no bias introduced into the equation. Anytime that humans start looking at IDs, they have inherent bias, and that bias is going to take over and may impact their decision making, which for a large bank that has all kinds of obligations to be equitable to all consumers, that presents a problem. And I'll finish off this slide very quickly with the added benefit that you get. Will talked earlier about how eliminating passwords can really eliminate a ton of attack vectors. And that's what this whole process on the left allows our customers to do. Once we've seen your ID once and seen your face once, we know who you are. In the future, the next time that you come visit my property, you don't have to put in a username. You don't have to put in a password. You can simply show your face. And with our advanced liveness detection capabilities, we're able to know that it's really Blair that's showing his face, and without typing a thing, allow him access and authorization into his account. So it's pretty cool stuff, I think, we do over here, Mitch.
It's fantastic. And I know you have a second slide on ID tampering that we'd love to have you talk about. It actually fits nicely. One of the questions that came from our audience is, what do you do about deep fakes? Right? You're talking about the facial recognition and how you use that as part of your technology. If you'd like, I'll go ahead and put up that
No, I've got it. I've got it up in front of me. So sorry, I probably can't see your screen anyway, but I know this one pretty well, and I'll definitely touch on the deepfake aspect. And for those of you fraudsters that have joined today to figure out our playbook and how you can get by a system like Authentic IDs, you're wasting your time, because I'm not going to give away the playbook, but we will talk about the bookshelves and the way that it works. I've already kind of beaten home the fact that this is 100% automated document analysis. But what do we look at? It used to be, and I've been in this business where we did it for the public sector, Customs and Border Protection agencies, Homeland Security, critical infrastructure facilities like that. It used to be that you base your analysis on whether a document was real or not on visual representations. Do the watermarks, do the patterns that we expect exist? Do the holograms exist? Do we get the right color placement or the right color response and the perfect placement on the document? We rely more and more, or less and less, I should say, on analyzing a document visually. Yes, we find a lot of mistakes that are made by the counterfeiters visually, but we also find ourselves faced with some pretty prolific organized crime groups that make available perfect templates for users. Virtually any identity document that you want around the globe, you can buy the template that visually, if you were to look at that identity document, it's going to look real to a human. It's going to take the type of forensic analysis that we perform in order to detect the fact that that's a fake. So we look at a variety of things beyond just what's contained visually on the document. We do a ton of analysis. We've got a bunch of data scientists that the data that are on these documents that may look like just random numbers, they really aren't random numbers. There's an algorithm to that. There's a reason that those numbers and those alphanumeric strings are on your document. They say something. And if you know what you're looking for, we can detect, and the fraudsters make tons of mistakes there. We look at behavior. So when the concept here is when a real person is going through the process of imaging their real ID and their real face, they act in a very specific manner and pattern. They use certain cameras. They hold their device in a certain way. Again, I won't give away our playbook, but one thing that happens in that bookshelf of algorithms and tests that run is if when you're prompted to take a selfie of your face, you were to use the rear camera versus the front-facing camera, that's anomalous behavior. It may not necessarily mean you're a fraudster, but it's kind of odd. So it's one of the data points that goes into our ultimate decision. And then lastly, we look at the EXIF data. Was that image really captured live and in person? Did it come from the location you asserted you were at, and things like that? So there's an overview, if you will, Mitch, of what happens under the covers at Authentic ID.
Fantastic. Interesting and reassuring that that's all happening. I'm glad you're not just verifying just the watermark, the things we used to do.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Say, Will, would love to have you talk about the ROI on these types of technologies. Obviously, it's got to be effective, but it's also, delivering the value and how much you invest and the return on that. I know you've got some data, some thoughts about that you can share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I don't know if we have the slide. Yeah, there we go. Any good consultant has a slide. Where we actually see kind of the value come back to, the enterprise really, it's for what we kind of term our integrated identity platforms, right? Which are platforms across that life cycle. 15.3x, which means every dollar invested, you get, $15.30 back. Really what we're seeing here is there's kind of three main areas we focus in on. One is, the conversion of more good customers, right? I think Blair said 6 seconds for that process. It's not a lot of time. If it was 6 minutes, you're going to have customer drop off, right? And that customer may come back, may never come back, right? So converting more customers adds more value to your business. Second big piece here is reducing kind of that overhead from integration. I mean, you're talking about people overhead, you're talking about implementation costs, et cetera, right? Having a full suite solution that can kind of do that whole experience reduces a lot of the kind of cost centers for enterprises like Capital One. And the last piece here is really around the fraud savings back to the actual enterprise. Now, there's also savings back to the end consumer, right? Because you break into someone's account, you're taking their actual money, right? That's a person's money, as well as the enterprise. And we see, significant return when talking to buyers to having that kind of full end-to-end solution. So from an ROI perspective, getting a solution that can really, support the onboarding and the life cycle of a customer, really important, not just to do things, like reduce fraud overall, but actually driving value back to that business. So the right solution really, pays for itself 15-fold here.
Wonderful. Anything? Did you cover this also, or anything?
Yeah. I think here, at the end of the day, right? Enterprises care about their customers, and the value is passed back to their customers. Obviously, things like a better experience, a better journey, some of those, not necessarily dollars and cents, but certainly something that the customer feels. And I think, to the point I think Stephanie made, right, is consumers want to feel protected, right? And knowing that they're protected, knowing that they're insured, especially if you're talking about something like financial services, right? Where, it's someone's potentially life savings somewhere, right? They need to feel secure. And having a solution that does that is, I think, paramount to building, trust if you're an enterprise with that end consumer, which at the end of the day, that's what you have to do to kind of maintain that relationship. And so, investing in solutions that can do that, it adds value, beyond just your enterprise. It adds value back to your actual, the actual consumer, the end user, as well.
Very good. Hey, we want to put up our first question, the one we showed earlier. Cody, if you can pop up that first poll question, get an idea of sort of where people are on their journey about having a strategy for verifying identities and, of course, finding fraudsters. So please vote. We'll get to see kind of where folks are. Interesting. It's real valuable because a lot of us want to know where I think I'm here, but I wonder where everybody else. Am I behind? Am I ahead? Am I where I should be? So give you an idea of at least the folks who self-selected to come to a webinar about the topic. If we got enough data there, if we have enough data. Oh, good. It's rolling in. So, novice a novice plan that primarily relies on manual process. Okay. Things are shifting a little bit. A good plan that needs some perfecting, half. That's interesting. And they're still getting some votes rolling in here. Good, but we've got a good number of recipients. Anybody else wants to vote? Do so quickly. Blair, any thoughts, comments on the data you're seeing here?
Yeah, first of all, 26% of you are using manual review. Don't do that. Get rid of that immediately. I'm an expert. If you think the people that you're employing to look at these IDs can tell the difference between a real and a fake, they can't. They can't do it quickly, and you're paying a lot more money for those people to do this than you could from an automated solution that can actually do it fast and do it accurately. Glad to see that we've got a good plan that needs some perfecting by darn near half the audience. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. Kind of the have-nots and haves in this audience, right? We don't have something, or it's manual, or we have a good plan kind of thing. Very good. If you can take that down, Cody, that would be fantastic. Stephanie, kind of finishing things up here, getting on to our last topic. We've talked a lot about enrollment. Of course, that relationship with that customer starts there, right? Maybe expands there, but they're with us. We hope they're with us for some time. What are the best practices for kind of mitigating and fraud and watching once someone's already gone through and begun that relationship with you and entered into your business with you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we collectively hit on a lot of these points, but just investing in fraud prevention across the various touch points and engagements of that, consumer journey, and not just at the enrollment stage, which is very critical, but also monitoring that both customer and fraud behavior is just as critical as investing in the customer experiences. The same way consumers are continuously evolving and changing the way they interact with us, so are fraudsters. And so the more that you can understand their behavior and specifically how they are performing or reacting across those various touch points, but from a holistic environment perspective, then you can start to build out a roadmap and stay ahead of those trends and not continuously be reacting to them. And I did see a couple of comments in the chat as well around, are you using various attributes? And I think Blair went into a couple of them as well, but just, the more information that you have on a fraudster's behavior and interaction across those various touch points, the easier it is to then think through how we might get ahead of that and what are the right technologies that are in various different states of evolution to start to try out and pilot, to see how they can potentially help mitigate some of that.
Very good. One of the questions I wanted to toss out there, Blair, you were talking about the process, the enrollment process, and the technology and capturing the selfie. One of our audience members wanted to know a little bit about where does the selfie get stored? You mentioned about giving your data to this entity, application, business. So people are always interested, well, where are you putting my data? And where's that all going? Thoughts
Sure,
around that? Sure, you get that question a lot.
Yeah, we do. And the answer is we're super flexible. Everybody has different risk appetites, and everybody wants to kind of wade into face in a variety of different ways. So pretty flexible. We have scenarios where our customer being a big bank or a big telco, ask us to store the face for subsequent authentications. Let me clear up a mystery here, though. We're not storing your face, folks. We have no idea what your face looks like at all. So your face is converted. We don't see your makeup, your hair, no, nothing like that. It's converted to landscape or to landmarks throughout your face, which is then converted into a template. That template is then one-way hashed. And that is what is stored. So if somebody were to ever able to break into I don't know how many layers of security, but tons of security, and gain access to that repository, they would get absolutely nothing. Those are irreversible one-way hashes. So it can be stored by us. It can be stored by our customer. We're also working on some novel encryption technologies that would allow that facial biometric to be stored, not even as a biometric any longer, due to the way that the encryption works right on the consumer's device. So we would never have it, our customer would never have it. You would be able to re-authenticate with that template, if you will, never leaving your device. There are pros and cons to all three approaches, and we can talk through all three of those. We certainly don't have enough time here in the next 5 minutes to talk about those pros and cons, but there are a variety of different methods is the short answer.
Very good. Well, speaking of that, why don't we just kind of, everybody, if you want to think of a parting thought, last thought on our topic today, we need a little bit of time because we've got some gift cards to give away. And Will, I'm going to ask you and then Stephanie and Blair to share sort of what's a takeaway you want to make sure that everybody has from today's session.
I'm on the spot. Well, I'm hoping to get the gift card too. So definitely sticking around for that. So yeah, I mean, I think that poll is really interesting. I think a lot of folks felt like they were just there. I would say it is a little bit of a, fighting fraud is a little bit of a moving puck, right? And so if you think you're there today, that doesn't mean you're going to be there tomorrow. And so if you're, out in market and kind of thinking about how to prepare yourself as kind of a company or enterprise here, I think you need to constantly reevaluate your procedures and kind of how you are doing things to make sure that you stay ahead of things. I think we are. I think it was the first topic we talked about. We're expecting a rise, especially in synthetic identity fraud. And so if you are saying, hey, I think we have this covered today, it's getting more sophisticated. The volumes are increasing. I think, you need to really start developing the next strategy today.
It's not a moving target. It's multiple moving targets, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Stephanie, would you take a minute? Parting thought?
Yeah, of course. And I'll just sort of jump on Will's train of thought there. But I think for me as a product manager and just in the industry, there are so many layers to biometric technology and it's evolving really quickly as well. And while we talk about, AI and voice biometrics and that helping fraudsters, like there's also the good side of those technologies as well that we as organizations can leverage. And it's having a huge influence and impact in how businesses think about their digital experiences as a whole, which is really exciting. And I think, we need to be thoughtful in how we approach these experiences to make sure that we're finding that balance of compliance, fraud, customer experience. But I just personally am very excited about the number of opportunities that there are to help really bridge that gap and find a good customer experience that is secure in a digital environment.
Very good. Blair, before you respond, I want to thank you, Authentic ID, and the full team for putting on today's session and bringing these experts together with us. So thank you. Your parting thought?
Thank you, Stephanie. I think you summed it up real nicely. I don't know how I topped that, but I kind of did evade the question earlier, and it's tangential to what you discussed. So we use AI for good to fight the AI for bad. The previous question that I neglected to talk about was ChatGPT. Don't be scared, folks. I know that the media has sensationalized this and really frightened the heck out of all of you. And there are some unprepared companies out there that don't have the right solutions for authentication in place. But if you have the right solutions in place, this is not really a concern today. If you think about what all these LLMs do, it's create synthetic data. Synthetic data is not real people, right? It's synthetic, and it has to be replayed somehow. It has to be replayed through a telephone, through a computer screen. It has to be injected into a computer feed. There's a variety of different mechanisms. But today we're able to recognize those signals. We're able to tell the difference between real people and synthesized faces, synthesized voices. So, it's a continuous battle like it always has been. They're going to get better, but today I feel pretty confident that we're able to stop those deep fake attacks, despite how sophisticated they are.
The good guys are working hard. Well, Cody, with that, we're going to turn it back to you, let you give away some gift cards and close out the show.
All right. Sounds good, Mitch. And Will, Blair, and Stephanie, thank you all so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure getting to speak with you. So I do just want to remind our audience today that this session was recorded. You will be receiving an email with a link to access the recording on demand, or of course you can find it living on the Security Boulevard website. Just visit securityboulevard.com/webinars and be sure to look in the on-demand section where it will be waiting for you. Now onto our 4 $25 Amazon gift card winners. They are Haral T, Agnes S, Rudy L, and Francis Z. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim your gift card. We will reach out to you in the next 48 hours or so. If you don't happen to see that email, check your spam folder just in case it happens to get filtered out. Once again, I'd like to thank Authentic ID for sponsoring our program. I'd like to thank Stephanie, Will, and Blair, and Mitch for joining us. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us for this past hour. We really appreciate your time, and we want to hear your feedback. So there is not only a link in the chat, but if you just stick around with us after we take this off the air, you will be redirected to a post-webinar survey, and we would love to hear your thoughts, whether they're about today's program or if you have suggestions for upcoming topics. Please do let us know, and we want to bring you the content that you want to see. So all that being said, thank you so much for joining us. You may now disconnect. Have a great rest of your day.